Welcome to the 30-Year-Old Virgin podcast, where we discuss all things sex, love, and relationships. I'm your host and favorite late bloomer, Allison Cadena. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about a topic that might be affecting some of our late bloomers that might be part of the reason why we got here, and that is religion. How does your religion affect the way you experience those favorite topics of ours, sex, love, and relationships? Well, to discuss this, we have a wonderful guest who is going to share his journey and his experience. So please welcome Alex.
Hello, hello.
Slow clap from me. So first of all, thank you so much for doing this podcast. We met through my favorite thing. Everybody who's listened to the podcast will know by now, I'm big on the TikTok. And so we met, we share a love of advice talk and also the dumbest humor. So, but getting to know each other, I heard a bit about your story and I thought it was really interesting. And I feel like it's something that other people can probably relate to. So you grew up, we're going to take a deep dive. You're going to guide me through it. I only know bits and pieces. But you grew up in a faith community. So do you mind telling us a little bit of like that upbringing, what you identify as, things like that?
Got it. So I grew up in the Mormon church. And if you're familiar with it, it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I grew up getting baptized when I was 8 years old. So it was basically the only religion I knew my entire life. And it was a religion that my mother, who met my stepfather at the time, brought them in. It's called a convert when you're brought into the church. And we... it was all I knew. It was the religion my mother followed, my siblings followed. I'm the oldest of 7. And it was the religion that, my stepfather also was a convert to. So my whole entire life was basically that Mormon religion. And I grew up in New York. So I grew up in the Bronx. So a lot of the churches that I went to and the activities and everything was actually here in the Bronx. So it was a different experience than maybe other people are familiar with when they come from different parts of the world who have been members or are members of the Mormon church. So
right. And so for those of us who don't really know, maybe you've heard a little bit about like the Mormon church. I did some research and there's a lot of variety depending where you're coming from. There's kind of a more strict portion that lives in Utah. And then from there around the world, it's like a little bit looser, I would say. Not quite exactly the same, but do you mind just sharing kind of like growing up, what did it look like for you? Was it like, were there rules that you had to follow?
Yeah. So the religion is very Christian based. So a lot of the Christian principles that people follow in the normal Christian religion, they also follow it in the Mormon religion as well. There's a couple of different nuances, a couple of different things, a couple of different practices that are different, like Lent. A lot of Catholics celebrate Lent. There's no real Lent in the Mormon church, but when you get baptized, there are certain things, a way of life that you live that you abstain from normally. So you probably heard that Mormons abstain from coffee. So Mormons don't drink coffee.
I didn't hear that. Y'all lost me right there.
Yeah. They call it the word of wisdom. So it's specific things that were kind of made as, the better word is rules, right? Or guidelines asking you not to do certain things. So coffee's one of them. A big one is also soft drinks. Like a lot of soft drinks are kind of frowned upon to drink. And a lot of the other things, the word of wisdom is no excessive red meat. You can't eat a lot of excessive red meat. The Mormon religion also teaches, being healthy, exercise, get good rest. And those are a lot of the kind of way of living. For me, it was a little different, like I said, growing up here in the city, because, it wasn't like over there in Utah where you go to Utah and every single church, it's in every Mormon church is in every single corner. And here in New York, there was, at the time in the 80s at least, there was probably like one church in the Bronx or two churches in the Bronx and then one in Manhattan. So, it was it was kind of a still growing community.
Right. And you weren't like in the center of like all Mormon all the time. Whereas over there it might be a little easier to enforce certain things.
Correct. I could basically say that growing up in the city, being in city schools, I probably was maybe one out of 1,000 Mormon kids that grew up, you know, in the city, schooled, you know, and stuff like that. But in Utah or some other parts of the country, it's completely different.
Yeah, like the schools are Mormon. All your neighbors are going to be Mormon. That's probably the guy that owns the store in the corners. I mean, I don't think they have stores in the corner in Utah. I'm from New York. I don't know what they got out there. But okay, so obviously you guys have rules about soda. So I'm sure you have rules about dating, marriage, sex.
Absolutely.
So can you go over kind of what you were taught on a lot of these topics?
So definitely starting in like early adolescence, they teach the youth very, very early on that it's completely abstaining from it. So it's abstinence all the way. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's you date, no fooling around, basically, and you get married. And when you get married, that's when you could start that those type of relationships. That portion of the relationship is once you're married, or what they call married in the temple. And I remember specifically, not that it was hard for me growing up, I kind of understood and I felt that growing up, that was something that I wanted to share specifically with the spouse. I didn't feel the need that, I needed that with someone. You know, my story actually is I never really dated much before I met my later on ex-wife. She was my first real girlfriend, my first real relationship, and you know, I just got used to that. But a lot of the Mormon religion just teaches to put yourself in situations where you don't get tempted, and it's really, really frowned upon if you know, you kind of break those rules. You know what I mean? Because a lot of it, like many other Catholic religions, there is what they call confession. So when you do sin, you do have to sit down with some person of authority inside the church and kind of explain what you did and figure out a way to what they call repent for whatever wrongdoings that you did. So it was definitely the type of religion that made you like really, really not want to take those steps to get to that part of a relationship.
Right. And I mean, I don't know if it's as strict in the Bronx and like you mentioned, but from when I was reading, like they have an idea of like moral cleanliness. So like obvious things like don't watch porn, but also it says like you're supposed to dress modestly.
Yes.
You're allowed to date, but like they encourage you to like take a friend and like don't be dating too seriously.
Double dating, no staying alone in cars. Any type of situation that would tempt you to take it to a different level. If I use the analogy like first base, second base, third base, like if you got to first base, you were like super lucky. Like you had to keep those relationships really, keep yourself out of situations where, you know, you would get tempted to do more than what you're supposed to do.
Now, I grew up Catholic, right? And in the some Catholics are going to come for me for saying this, but I'll be honest, there's some people who are really in the church and they kind of keep that facade of like being very chaste and not doing nothing. But on the down low, people be dating, people have sex, and you know, is that common in the Mormon?
I want to say that's a human nature thing. I'm big into like now, at least as a person and understanding myself and where I came from. That's a part of human nature. Like we all want that desire we all want that feeling to be desired and to be cared for and to share what I feel is a God-given right to love and to be loved. So whether it's any religion, I think that people use it to their benefit, right? And if they see a rule or a regulation or whatever that they don't like, they're always going to find a way around it. They're always going to find a way to do what they feel is pleasing to them. So yeah, like anytime, at least I don't know about me per se, because I really, when I talk about my first girlfriend, I was 19 almost. 19, 20 when I had my first real girlfriend. So it took me a while to get there. And it was because, again, it was the feeling of I didn't want to put myself in a situation where I was going to break the rules, and I started to develop that. And when it started happening in the beginning, like I knew that I wanted to follow and be a good member. But at the time, the person who I was seeing, my ex-wife, she wasn't a member of the church yet either. So I knew that there was going to be a process if we were going to get serious, which eventually we did. We got married. But I knew there was going to be a process of, before I get married or whatever the situation is, that I was going to have to, do that. So,
yeah. That kind of leads into my next question, which was going to be, I know you were not like, you didn't, not that 19 is even really like late to be dating. I remember just look at what podcast you're on, but were you conscious of like wanting to date someone in the faith, or was that something that you considered like right away?
You know what? I never really gave it importance. To me, it was, if I'm gonna find someone, I'll find them. It wasn't if they had to. I didn't feel like I had to. Now, if I could remember correctly, it wasn't told like, look, you have to only date within the church. There wasn't that rule. But within a lot of either religions or any type of group type of mentality, you still feel like that is pressure. The better way. You know what I mean? Because a lot of it was, if you dated within the church, that person also has the same standards as you. And that person and you, knowing right from wrong, won't be tempted to do the wrong things.
Right.
So anytime you had a relationship that was with someone out of the church, there was that kind of feeling that, oh, you're probably going to be a little bit more tempted now because one of you is the only one that's upholding those rules. So,
right. Or there'd be like having to teach them and like kind of get their sign off on like, this is what we do now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it was different. I mean, I do remember having that conversation, being in 19 or 20, I forget when it was at the time, and explaining to my then ex-wife that, I was a virgin. And it was like, she was like shocked. She's like, I can't believe that. And it was like, no, it was, I had standards. I had a way of living that I just kind of upheld, and I look back at those times, and still to this day, I feel like those were good decisions. You know what I mean? I don't feel like, oh, I should have not done it, or, I still feel like, I hate the word clean, but I still feel like I had my morals. You know what I mean? And that's always good to have. It's always good to have morals.
Right. So you're, then, girlfriend turned wife turned ex-wife. We'll get to that part. Did she come from any kind of faith background, or like, was she like,
she was raised like through Catholic churches, so it was very similar. I want to say I don't think it was Pentecostal, but it was one of those churches where before when we were dating, she talked about going to different churches, and she also was a believer. She followed religion as a whole. So when I introduced her to Mormonism, it was, it was different for her. It was something new. I think at the time she never really heard of it. But seeing how I practiced, like one of the things I distinctively remember is that they don't curse. Like when you really talk to Mormons don't curse. So
how are you friends with me? Well, I guess because you're not in the church anymore. But I'm like, you've heard me speak, right?
Yeah.
Are you horrified every time?
No, not at all. And also I grew up in the city, so imagine being that type of person that just doesn't curse, doesn't speak negative words to other people. Doesn't do that, and just living in the city, like it was crazy. It was crazy, but. Even to this day, like, it's not that I feel weird when I say a bad word. It's just, it's not the first thing that comes to mind. Even if I'm a tad bit upset or whatever, like a curse word doesn't come to my mind. It's always something else to express how I'm feeling.
Right.
But, that's just, how we were raised and how we are.
Right.
You know?
So I'm just curious, since your girlfriend was not of the faith and you had kind of more strict boundaries of what you're allowed to do or not to do, how did that affect like the way you moved in your relationship, like the pacing of it?
We dated for 2 years before we got married, and you know, everything went like a normal relationship would kind of go.
You was kissing?
Yes. I don't
Breaking
know.
the rules. No,
I don't know. But yeah, it was there were times that I didn't want to put myself in that situation, but after a few months or maybe even closer to a year in the relationship, I just knew that I was going to get married. Like I knew that was going to be my person at the time. So, in my mind, whatever it was that I did, or I knew that, or at least I felt that this is my person. Like I'm not going to be with anybody else in a relationship. If I do have sex or if I don't have sex, like this is going to be my person. Like growing up, I always thought that rule was because they didn't want you to be promiscuous.
Right.
And have sex with multiple people, whatever. So I identified with, well, she's my person and I'm just going to do it. So she wasn't of the faith at the time. And yeah, things happened, but I look back at it and it was me growing into the person that I am today. I never look back and think of things or my past as mistakes. I think of it as learning experiences, and just learning more about life and seeing right from wrong and understanding the difference, which fast forward to now, is like completely different mind frame, but still with basic overall principles.
Right. And I think it's interesting too, because you said that like you kind of saw it as like, I just don't want to be promiscuous. And that's the reasoning behind it. Because when I was doing my research, the Mormon faith, they say sexual sin is like second only to murder. So it's a big deal. But at the same time, they say that once you're married, sex is part of like bonding with your spouse. It's not seen as like only to have children, like in some other religions. It's like, it's part of the experience. It's part of getting closer to each other. So I think it's interesting that like, it's like sex positive, but like after this point.
Exactly. And I guess, again, fast forwarding to now, like that's the hang up with me. Like that's the hang up that there's that, the word that comes to mind is always restriction, right? There's a restriction about something that's innately human about us as humans, where we can develop these relationships with people and share this intimacy that to me is super, super important. So yeah, like you say, that the religion teaches that once you're married, that's healthy and it's great and it's wonderful and you should, continue. But before, it's like, hold, stop, do not pass go. So those things are what hung up for me at the point where I got divorced about 3 years ago, where I was no longer in that relationship. And I was, out there, looking for another relationship. And it was, do I still follow these rules that, not that it hurt me, but do I follow these rules that put me in a place mentally where I don't want to be? Or am I just going to kind of move forward with my life and figure out a way to still keep my morals intact, but do it in a way where I'm searching for my happiness. You know what I mean? I'm a firm believer now in, that core belief of just doing what I want to do that makes me happy. And me forcing other people to do things that they don't want to do is not what I follow. Right. So that's why when I got divorced, soon after that, I became inactive in the religion. So I haven't been to church in years. And it's something that I don't think about it. I know and follow what a lot of people refer to as spirituality. So I believe in a higher power. I believe that, the universe was created by a higher power and the universal language is love, And so with those key principles, I go about my day, just thinking about those core beliefs.
Right. Now, I do want to take a little step back because you you brushed past something important here. So you did end up, you got married to this person, you had children, some time passes, and you got divorced. And now divorce, that is like a no-no in most religions. It's supposed to be like, that's your spouse, you ride or die till the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you left the church, you said, after that. So I'm wondering, how did you even get to that decision to get divorced with that upbringing that said that wasn't like allowed? And like, what was the struggle with it? How did you get there?
It was strange because religion wasn't even on my mind when I was in that process. I was married for 14 years and together with my ex for 16 of those years. So we spent a majority of our, younger adult years kind of just growing together, in my experience, at least. I can't speak for her, but in my experience, I didn't do that much growing. I didn't do that much finding myself. I kind of found us together as a unit and grew in that. So fast forward to about 3 years ago when we were growing apart, it was just one of those things where I know it was frowned upon. It's frowned upon in the Mormon religion to get divorced, but it's not you can't come back to church type of thing. It's more like, you're no longer a family unit anymore. You know what I mean? And you're breaking that, I guess, ceremonial bond that that Mormons make, because they believe that not only are you together here on earth, but you're also together in the afterlife. So when you get divorced, you're kind of breaking those things. Right. So it's a big deal for them. And it's really, I don't want to say hard, but it's not a simple process. You do have to meet with certain people and things have to get done. So it's again, it's not that you can't get divorced. It's just that it's very frowned upon.
Right. And I almost feel like it's more serious because it's not just about you, like you're doing a sin. It's about like you're breaking this like almost unit. Like covenant, with the universe.
You absolutely. That's the right word. That was the word I was looking for. Yeah, it's that's what it's exactly referred to in the religion, is the covenant. You're breaking a promise not only here on earth, but you're breaking a promise in the afterlife about the person that you were supposed to be with for eternity. So it was a big deal, and like I said, going back to 3 years ago, it was tough. It was tough breaking that that feeling of just breaking those promises, right? And the demise of a relationship. I remember reading a good book. I forget the name of it, but the demise of a relationship is likened to a death. You know what I mean? When you were with this person, especially me, with all those years, you built a unit, and when you are dissolved from that unit, it's like a death. So you have to mourn it like a death. So I remember a good 7-8 months of just mourning. Like I couldn't think, I couldn't eat, it was very, very hard for me to break out of that. But I did it. And I look back on it now, and it's like, it was part of my growing. It was part of my growth. It was something that needed to happen, for me to learn and to really appreciate now and moving forward in the future, where I'm at in life and what is it that I exactly want. I have a clearer picture now of what is it that I want in life and who I am as a person, so that I'll be ready if I get the opportunity again to be in a relationship.
Right. So I guess kind of moving to the next part of it is like, you are now back in the dating field, right? And you've made that choice to let go of, or step back from the church and kind of their restrictions. What was that like when you first decided to get back into the dating field? Like, did you kind of know how you wanted to take things? Was there like a learning experience in it?
It was definitely a learning experience. If I could briefly explain, since I basically married my first, real girlfriend, I didn't date. And this is going back to 2002. So I didn't date. I didn't have what a lot of people would normally consider a dating type of life. So being where I was 3 years ago and seeing the environment where modern dating is nowadays, it was like my mind was blown. Like there was no swipe left, swipe right back in the days. There was none of that. So the whole way of dating has changed. And it took some getting used to, it took some understanding. But early on, I knew that backtrack. So because I got divorced and I left the church, I started to identify, like I said, with spirituality and identify with things that are good in nature. And I wanted to be a good person, and that being said, I knew that, I didn't want to take advantage. This whole idea of, manipulation and making people do things within mind games and tricks. I didn't know any of that stuff. So in the beginning, I just knew to myself, I was like, I want to treat people the way I want to be treated. You know what I mean? So what does that look like? What does that look like when you're dating? And I said to myself, I was like, I'm not going to tell myself that I need to be married if I'm going to share that piece of intimacy with someone. That's not something that I follow anymore. You know what I mean? I feel intimacy is extremely important in a relationship. And, some might say, well, intimacy is not just sex. Like, I understand that. Like, you're absolutely right. Like, there's many things that people could do to be intimate that doesn't have to do with sex. But I feel like what's good for me is a good mix of those two things. Like there's well, at least I'm at the age in my life where I feel like when you're building a relationship with someone, you want to know that there's chemistry. You want to know how this person operates and how they think. And it's not just the physical act of that intimacy. It's, how people operate when they do. If they're caring, if they're considerate, you can figure out if they're selfish. There's so many things about a person you could figure out when you're intimate with them that you can't figure out if they're not. So that's why I feel it's very important. At least for me, I knew that when I was going to start dating, that was going to be on the table. That was never going to be off the table. But I also did know, and I started to learn through my experiences, that sharing of that sharing of spirituality and essence, like I understood that still had to be preserved. You know what I mean? I remember one of the first dates I went on, very nice lady. We had a little bit of chemistry, and after telling her my story, because I'm very open with people, I tell them, look, I was divorced, but her first kind of words were, so you're going to go through your whole phase now? And I was like, whoa, hold up. Like that never in my mind resonated with me that, oh, I need to sow my oats, and I just need to be out there and part. Like that never resonated with me because the way I grew up was the complete opposite. I knew that wasn't the person I wanted to be. But being a single person and dating and meeting new people, I feel like it's good so that you could learn more about yourself. Because I think we've talked about this before, but dating, the whole process of dating is learning more how to love yourself and finding the great qualities that you have in other people and developing those qualities and learning how to build something with someone who has similar qualities with you. And then sometimes you can learn, some of the bad things that other people do, and that's the whole big red flags. Like for me, like I had no idea when I started dating and people were hearing red flag this, red flag that. I was like, oh my God, like what is it? What is this dating scene come to? But again, I saw the importance of looking for those clues, looking for those, looking for how people operate. You know what I mean? And that's why when I got divorced, I got heavy into, self-improvement, healing and all those topics that you just basically want to grow. So I got heavy into all that. So yeah, Yeah.
Because I think also, I mean, you got married by like what, 21?
I was 22 when I got married, and 23 when I had my first child.
Yeah, and like, you know, even though we think we're grown at that age, like now actually being properly grown, you know that you're still a kid. You're just barely touching the adult world, and you've made this commitment to another person when you're not even like 100% you yet. Like you don't even know you, and now you're like, we're in this together, and we've like signed up for life together.
Yeah.
So do you feel like, I mean, maybe I'm being presumptuous, but do you feel like the fact that you grew up in the church maybe put a little pressure on you that like the person I'm dating should become a wife, or like that you had to move a little quicker to get to marriage?
You know what? I would say, if you look it up, and historically, Mormons marry fast. They always marry fast, and they marry young because, and again, I can't speak for every individual. I can only speak for myself. You get to a point when you're in a relationship with someone that you want to experience those parts of intimacy. You want to experience that. So do you rush? I don't know if it's rush, but you get to that point where you want to share that with someone else, and you get there pretty quick. You know what I mean? Especially if there's chemistry with that other person, you want to share that with others. So not that you feel like you have to, but human nature is like, okay, this is my person. I like this person. We mesh well together. Like, I want to take this to the next step. So yes, it's very much, you know, date. You find who you want to be. You know, you want to be with this person forever. Get married.
Right. And I think even the fact that like, because there's like church teachings on it, there's also that idea of like, if I get married, like I'm like accomplishing something, if that makes sense. It's like I got my degree, I got, you know, those things that you like check off. It's like, well, now I'm gonna level up in the church because now I've got a wife, and I'm making this commitment and stuff like that. So I feel like that even
absolutely.
So now that you're back in the dating world, though, is that still something that's important to you? Like, I mean, I know you said you're not really that attached to like having a whole phase, but are you still like dating to marry, or are you like, I'm trying to have experiences?
I still want to date to marry. Absolutely. I feel like even in my experience, for me, speaking for me personally, I still do believe in the concept of love. I do feel like, you know, when I get the opportunity to find that person, you know, I do want to be married again. I don't look at it harshly. You know what I mean? I don't look at it. It's just sometimes when you're with someone, you grow apart, and when that process begins, and for me, it took many years. It was like a series of years back to back that got us to that point of divorce. But, you know, I do want to be in love with someone, and I want someone to be in love with me. But it's different. It's different now. I feel like at this stage in my life, I want to know that this is, and you can't always know, right? There's never a definite. I feel like in life, the only thing you can count on really is you, right? You can be with other people in a partnership, and, you know, you can give them the opportunity to show you trust. But at the end of the day, you could only trust yourself. You know what I mean? And what you're in control of. And that's one of the core principles that I've been following. A really good book called The Four Agreements that in the beginning, when I read that book, opened my eyes. And it's just, you can't make people do anything that they don't want to do. You know what I mean? And all you could do is control yourself and how you react to people, instead of being reactionary yourself. So that book helped me see that, and a lot of great advice in that book of, you know, speaking the word, you know, speaking in the way of love and light, you know, not making assumptions about people. Really good book if you're beginning that kind of journey in your life for finding yourself and finding purpose. You know, that book will easily give you some good insight and perspective.
Right. And I think it's interesting because I feel like you're coming back into dating with the experience of having been in a really successful relationship, because obviously you guys were together for so long. It was successful. And then also in an unsuccessful relationship toward the end of it, of like now understanding what didn't work, that you can say like, actually, you know, what was missing was like my development. And you know, being able to see kind of on both lenses, and even the fact that you can see it on both lenses with like the same person, I think can kind of isolate like what was, I mean, like literally, like if it's the same person and it worked and then it didn't, what happened?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You have more insight. I would agree with you. You have more insight, at least for me. You know, I've always skipped that whole blame game thing. That's another thing I learned when I was doing my self-healing journey, that you know, you can't blame your actions on other people. All you could do is take accountability, which is one of my favorite words, you know, for your behavior and the things that you do. And because you can't control other people and you can't make people do things that they don't want to do, all you could do at the end of the day is take ownership of what you did and move forward. You know, there's no point, at least in my opinion, in dwelling on the hurt and pain of the past. You know what I mean? And there's no point in dwelling on the anxiety of the future. You know what I mean? The future of the unknown. You know, all you could do is live in the present and take every moment and take every opportunity in the present to be the best version of yourself.
Right, right. Now, I want to bring it back a little bit to religion, because I do still think that it probably still plays a part in what you're going through now, at least trying to reconcile things. Are there things that you had to, how can I say this? Are there things that you felt like I absolutely need to keep in the way I operate in dating versus things you were like, I need to just like toss this away for now?
Yeah, so definitely that was that. Like, again, if I were to stay being in that religion, I wouldn't have been able to be intimate. I wouldn't have been able to have sex. I would have been, again, dating people that were either in the religion or out of the religion, and letting them know that, hey, you know, just so that you know, I have this promise and this commitment that, you know, I'm not going to have sex till I'm married, you know, and that was going to be something that I was going to have to tackle. But like I said, I began to identify with doing what's best for me. And at that time, I made a decision that what was best for me moving forward was to experience that, to have sex, to build what I feel like is a normal part of a relationship. You know, I feel like, you know, getting to know somebody is great and wonderful, but without sex, it's more like, you know, you start to feel like regret, or you start to feel like anxious, and it puts you in a different mind state where you're just worried. You know what I mean? Is this person going to accept me? Is this person going to, you know what I mean? And for me, it was like, I didn't want any of that. I didn't want any I didn't want, you know, nothing blocking me, you know, from doing what I felt was necessary and what was good for me. You know what I mean? And while some on the outside might consider that selfish, I think the best way to answer that is that, to a certain extent, we all are selfish. We all do what's in our best nature. And on the rare occasion where you do something for someone else, it's always, well, again, it's a pattern I learned to get out of, but it's always, when you do things for the benefit of yourself. So you might do some wonderful action for someone or a favor or something, but at the end of the day, it's always with the assumption, oh, this person is going to do a favor back for me. You know, it's giving those things with a string attached. You know, another good book I read was No More Mr. Nice Guy. And that book talked about it a lot, where men's nature is just that. I'm going to get her flowers, or I'm going to do all these chivalrous things, and in exchange for something from that woman. And that was a pattern that I immediately had to learn how to get out of, because I didn't want to do something for something. I had to learn how to just give freely of my time, energy, resources. I have to give freely and not expect anyone to give me back.
Right.
You know, I'm a firm believer that because the universe is just that love, that the right people out of the kindness of their heart will give back to you. You know, if I give with expectations, it's always giving with the wrong intentions.
Right.
You know, you give out of the kindness of your heart. You don't give expecting things from people to do a certain way. So I feel like those were some of the concepts that I had to like learn ultimately.
Well, even that though, it has like a little bit of a faith base, because that is like the golden rule: treat people how you want to be treated, not treat people the way they treat you or you think they're going to treat you, or because it's like a tit for tat.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you a little bit on the spot because you haven't brought it up, and I'm wondering if it's related to religion. Now, we've talked about it before that when you date, you only date like one person at a time. Now, I'm maybe I'm wrong, but I'm wondering, does that maybe come out of the same idea of, because for Mormons, it's a big thing about like fidelity and like being purposeful in why you date someone because you're going to marriage. Do you think that came from that, or is that more from like just what you've learned in relationships?
I think it's a mixture of both of them, because I want to say, out of my personal experience, I've had those conversations and saying, look, I'm dating multiple people at the time. I'm very big on stating my intentions. Like, I feel like there should be more of that in society, both men and women. You know, speak with intentions and let people know what your intentions are. So I remember having those conversations on first dates or whatever and saying, look, you know, I am, you know, dating multiple people, or bringing it up somehow along the way. And sometimes it's a turnoff for people. And I could see why. I could see why somebody who's dating someone or goes on a first date with someone and they're being told by the person that's sitting across from them or whatever that, you know, I'm dating other people. Like, you know, you're one of the candidates that I'm looking into. So I get why that would be a turnoff for some people, but realistically, that goes into the subconscious of being and feeling that they're not going to be enough, that they're not going to be the winner, that they're not going to be the one that's chosen. You know what I mean? So that deals a lot with the anxious attachment style, which is something that, you know, me and you have talked about before. You know,
we
just
know
people, you know,
all
just
the self-help buzzwords.
There we go. So, you know, and that's, you know, there's going to be people that are still going through that part of the journey, and that's okay. I'm really big on not judging people, you know, but just understanding where people are coming from and using empathy to see things from their perspective. You know what I mean? So in this realm now of dating, it's like, well, first of all, I also believe that because intimacy is so cherished for me, at least that exchange of energy, I don't want to have that with multiple people. That exchange of energy to me is still very, very sacred. So I've made the decision that if I do get to that point with someone where I do want to be intimate with them, I'm only having intimacy with that person. Like I really strongly believe that the more you spread that energy out, the more you hurt yourself and other people as well. So it's so, and that goes with the spirituality piece, which I also follow a lot of, is you want to preserve that energy for the right person at the right time. And it's something still very sacred, something still very universal with sharing that with someone. So there's been times where I've been dating maybe multiple people and, you know, was only intimate with one, still dating other people and, you know, everyone knowing what's going on, you know, but with the understanding that, look, this is this and that is that. And it worked for a little bit, you know, it was okay for a little while, but I started to really realize that whole process of just going on first dates and talking about your favorite color and this and that with multiple people at the same time, it's really draining and exhausting. You know what I mean? So, you know, I've come to the realization that when I do find the person I want to be exclusive with, I'm just going to be with that person. Like I can't be over here, you know, I think, and by the way, I think talking stages are completely different than actually dating someone. Like you can go on a first date with someone and it's not, to me, like like not a commitment, but it's not like you're exclusive with that word. You can go on multiple first dates with people just to get to know people and understand people, where they're coming from. But after like the second, third, fourth date, if you're continuing to see that person and you see the possibility of being in a relationship with that person, I'm very quick to state my intention and say, okay, I see something. I definitely hate the idea of, look, me and you have to be a girlfriend and boyfriend before we take it to the next. Like, no, like I don't believe in that. But I agree that the intention has to be there. Like, look, I really enjoy, spending time with you and whatever. And I want to see where this could go, and then focusing and being exclusive with that person. That's how I see dating now is, you could share those first dates with a couple of other people, but when your person is your person, you kind of narrow that down and kind of throw all the other possibilities out the window and be very clear with everyone. I've done it before where I've sent text messages, basically saying, hey, I'm seeing someone else right now exclusively. I appreciate the time we spent together, but I respect, I hope you respect that. And, so I've had those conversations and I've had to tell people, that, but, the good ones stay. Some of them don't. Some of them don't like being second or third choice. I get that, but, it's all about being healthy, and moving forward in a healthy relationship is just that is those clear intentions and the boundaries, which is another buzzword I love. I had no idea growing up of boundaries. I had no idea. It wasn't until this period of healing and growing that I learned how important boundaries are. So
I think you bring up an interesting point about like, and again, I'm speaking as someone outside of the faith, but I mean, well, I grew up Catholic, but in my house, it wasn't really enforced. But I think a lot of times they teach you this is the goal, right? To find someone to marry and have a family and everything. But they don't teach you what works or how to get there. And I think that's what makes it complicated. It's like you're telling me where I have to get to, but you're not telling me how to get there the right way.
Absolutely.
Like, and you're saying like you didn't know about boundaries. Like we're not taught how to date to get to that perfect person or like how to make a relationship work. And I think that's where it gets complicated.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And again, it all has to do with at least for me growing up, emotion was something that wasn't really spread in my house. You know what I mean? I mean, of course I had a loving mother and a loving stepdad who raised me, but emotions was scarce. You know what I mean? Or not that it was scarce. It wasn't really explained because I feel like at least now in our culture, men aren't really taught how to describe their emotion. Men know emotion. We all share those wonderful traits with each other, but they aren't taught to describe how they feel. We know good, bad, right, wrong, but we don't know anything other than angry or sad. We don't know some of those more complex emotions that we have. We know we feel something, but we don't know how to describe it. And that's where I feel like women have a little bit of an upper hand. They know emotion. They're very comfortable with emotion, and that's good. It's intuition. It's just the essence of a female is understanding emotion. So I feel like for me at least, that gives me a good opportunity to understand women and to understand where they're coming from, because I could understand the emotions that they're going through. And I feel like that with understanding that key piece is why I feel like if I am dating, I have to state my intentions. You know what I mean? The whole idea of men and players and all this well, first of all, I don't know if I could find a Mormon player. Like it's just not us. They're probably out there, but I just don't know. I don't feel like it's in us. You know what I mean? Knowing the way we were raised and knowing how we treat people. Like you can't be a player if you care about people. You know what I mean? And you care about their feelings. Like you just can't. Like a player doesn't care. They only care about themselves. So there goes the narcissist and all these other buzzwords, about people who behave and operate like that. And it's the complete opposite with me. Like I can't operate in that space because I don't want, well, first of all, I don't want people doing that to me.
Mm-hmm.
I would hate to be on the other end of a date and saying, hey, look, I'm dating you, but I'm dating 3 other guys right now. So hopefully you win, I can't resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that's why it's so important to have those boundaries and stuff like that. So you don't want to treat people, you want to treat people good.
Yeah. So some of, I mentioned kind of in the beginning that I would imagine that some of our listeners that are like specifically late bloomers, religion may be one of the reasons that they are that way. And I wonder, is there anything that you think you can impart on them that like will make their understanding of love and relationships and sex a little bit easier? Now, I'm not saying that they necessarily have to like, get to that point of like drop the religion, but is there something that like you wish you had known this and maybe it would have changed the course of things?
I want to say you always want to do things that not that feel good. You want to do things that okay. Let me backtrack, right? So this new idea that I started to follow once I left the religion is that in life there's really no right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Or excuse me, let me backtrack. There's no there's no good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's right and wrong. There's good things to do to people and there's wrong things to do to people. But it's all a matter of your perspective. What one can see as something right, someone else could see as wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Depending on their view and their lens. So with that being said, the only type of advice that I would impart on people is do what makes you feel right at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You have that personal relationship with the higher power, with your God, with, the universe. You have that own personal relationship with God. So you do what you feel is best for you. So if what's best for you is to continue being abstinent before you get married, then that's absolutely what you should do. I would never tell anyone that they should or shouldn't do anything. You always have to do what's in your best interest at the end of the day, because what other people in the world are doing, what's always in their best interest. So that's how I feel that people should operate and do. So that's the one piece of information that I would give people. And again, you can't change the past. So, life is all about lessons and all about learning experiences. And for some people who might be listening, that experience might be hooking up with the rando in the bar, or you know what I mean? Like it's all about, safe, of course, but you have to experience life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You have to be able to say there's certain things you do, because one of the things that I learned being in a religion that was ultra conservative like that was that when I was up against a force of things that I didn't want to do, it made me want to do them more. Mm-hmm. And that's just human nature. Somebody tells you you're going to want to do it even more now. So I feel like being that ultra conservative kind of not tempts, but it kind of makes you want to do the things you're not supposed to be doing anyway. Because again, that's human nature. Right. You know what I mean? So following a religion or following teachings or following these things, they're gonna restrict you in one way or another. And the more you feel restricted, the more subconsciously, right, your blind spot, I think we've talked about that before, the more your blind spot is gonna irk you, because it's your subconscious wanting you to do the things that you haven't experienced yet. Because again, life is all about that. It's about experience. You getting to learn things that you like, getting to learn things you don't like, and just being able to take those experiences with you,
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because that actually, I feel like this relates really strongly to a lot of the other conversations that we've been having on this podcast, where people talk about trusting yourself to make decisions, but then also like questioning things. And I think that might also be a little bit of where people struggle with religion, because they're taught something, but maybe they don't fully understand why that is, or why they want to bring that into their lives. Like you can make that decision to be, abstinent or whatever it may be, but let it be something that resonates with you
Yes.
and not just something that you kind of take at face value.
Yes. And the whole thing about that is human nature is explanations. Like, I want to know why. Like, tell me why I need to be abstinent. There's no real reason why.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because it was taught. Like, there's no, oh, you need to be abstinent because, you don't want to get an STD. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make any sense.
Or it'll just be, God said you only use this for procreation.
Correct. There's
why did he say that?
Logically, at least to me, logically, there's no real explanation. Like let's say the coffee thing. Like, even to me, like, there's no real reason why you can't drink coffee. You know what I mean? But again, you make those promises and you follow those promises. So that's what a lot of religion is. You building that relationship and you having faith that if you follow those teachings, that good things will happen for you. Mm-hmm. And in the space that I've created for myself now, I feel very strongly that I create those, that positivity from the universe with laws of attraction and putting out good in the universe. I feel like I create those things for myself. And once the universe sees that part of you that you just want to help, and spread love to the universe will always, in one way or another, spread that back to people who are doing good out there. And it's the whole karma thing too. You do good things for people, things are going to come back your way. And I used to be the person that's check, okay, I did this good and now it's my turn, give it back. Like, no, I don't pay attention to that stuff anymore. I just do good things and good things come. If bad things come, that's okay too. It just means you have to take the good with the bad and you have to find the silver lining in every experience.
Right. And I think, I want to make sure not to because you made the decision to leave your faith, but I think there is also, when you consider your advice of kind of questioning and doing what's right for you, I think for some people that might actually strengthen your faith, because when you make the choice and it's not just being imposed on you, you're actually making that choice to follow those teachings or whatever, those restrictions, because it makes sense to you, because it's what you want to do. I think that can also be very powerful. And
that's also big in the Mormon religion. It's called agency. Everyone has agency. We have the right to choose right from wrong. Mm-hmm. And that was a God-given ability, is that agency. Mm-hmm. I just feel like what gets lost in the translation is that when people do bad, that it's really frowned upon and you're excluded in many circumstances, and you feel chastised when you make those wrong decisions. But we all have agency. We all can choose right from wrong. You know what I mean? But it's speaking to your listeners, it's really important for you to understand those concepts and understand you have a choice. You can choose what you would like to do or not.
Right. So we are actually out of time, but I want to thank you, Alex, so much for coming through and sharing your experience.
You're welcome.
If you guys resonate with anything that Alex said, you can find him on TikTok, Instagram. He does post a lot of his journey as well and the things that he's working on or has learned. You can find him at Purpose Driven Male on both of those. And then also make sure that you subscribe to our podcast, and we'll see you next week for another episode of the 30-Year-Old Virgin Podcast.